Welcome back to Avaya, Dr. Ameet.
Thank you, Brielle. Thank you, everyone. Super excited to really dive into why our parents' trauma and their psychological and emotional abuse turns into abuse towards us. Yeah. Also, what we can do to heal from their trauma, our parents' trauma, our own trauma with family constellations therapy, and why people get anxious and depressed after being traumatized, whether psychologically or emotionally. And I'll also cover some homeopathic remedies you can use to get out of that state of fear, anxiety, depression, and intrusive thoughts that often come when we're psychologically or emotionally abused. So we'll go through it systematically so that you really get to the core of healing for yourselves today.
Beautiful. I can't wait to learn from you today and hear about how emotional and psychological abuse from our parents' past, grandparents' past affects us and how we lead that cycle on if we don't work with this. So I'd love if you could get started by telling us why emotional and psychological abuse can lead to anxiety, depression, burnout, or even issues like suicidal thoughts.
So when we're traumatized, our mind, our adrenal glands, our nervous system goes into fight, flight, or freeze response. And in that state, we create neurotransmitters that are either excessive or we burn our adrenal glands out and our neurotransmitters start dropping. So serotonin, dopamine, GABA, they all get imbalanced. And when that happens, we get thoughts like, well, we get anxiety, depression, intrusive thoughts, suicidal thoughts, low self-esteem, etc. Also, when reality changes, yeah, after we've been abused, then our perception of the world and of ourselves changes. We think we're not good enough, we weren't strong enough, we should have done better, we should have stood up for ourselves, or we blame ourselves. Yeah. And often when we're abused psychologically, emotionally by parents, we have a certain love or bonding towards our parents. So it's hard to reject or refuse that abuse for many people. So we swallow it as if it's almost a form of truth for us that it was okay to be abused like that. Yeah. We don't know that we had the right to be safe. And so when we swallow these things, or when we go through the fight, flight, or freeze response for a long time, our nervous system just gets depressed. Yeah. Our neurotransmitters get out of balance, and then we get these mental health symptoms. But there's hope because all these things I'm talking about, they can be healed with trauma release, family constellations therapy, and homeopathy.
Amazing. It's great to hear that it can be healed, these issues that people might be experiencing. And so, could you tell us about why the trauma of our parents and grandparents can lead to our own emotional and psychological abuse? And how does your family constellations therapy help with that?
So in family constellations therapy, we look at inherited trauma. We often take on the fears, traumas, emotions of our parents, our grandparents, our siblings. And when we take on these traumas, we get emotions that basically we get stresses, yeah, onto our own nervous systems. And that leads to psychological problems. Now, if our parents have been abused, for example, I had a client, she had suicidal thoughts, and she found out basically that her father didn't want her mother to be pregnant with her. And the father had other partners as well. So the father beat her mother so that her mother could abort my client. And so this was abuse towards her mother. Now, we found out in the family constellations therapy session that basically my client felt if she died, if she didn't survive, then her mother would survive, meaning the sooner she died, then her mother would be safe and would stop being beaten. Yeah. And when we realized that, I asked her to say to her mom, "Dear mom, please forgive me if I live. Yeah. Thank you for surviving. I've lived. And even if I live, you will still survive." That realization set her free, and she's realized to herself, gosh, I have permission to thrive and survive now. Yeah. So we take on, out of love and loyalty, the pain of our family members. And when they're traumatized, or abused or, yeah, emotionally, psychologically, then that abuse is passed down through generations. But it's not only their abuse. Sometimes I had another client where their the father lost his younger brother, yeah, at a very early age. So the father was super traumatized and was missing this younger brother all the time. And so, in a way, the father was not fully available to other people in his life. So he was unconsciously distant from his children, his own children, including my client, as well as his wife, my client's mother. So his trauma led to his absence in the nuclear family. So my client was always missing her father. And my client was also stressed because the father and the mother weren't getting along because the father was not fully available to the mother. So my client felt this pressure that she has to fix the relationship. And then when she realized and respected her father's love for the missing brother, yeah, she really bowed down and says, okay, I respect your love for this missing brother. I know what's happening now for you. She felt a sense of completion. She could recognize truly who her father was. And that settled her nervous system. She stopped missing her father. And that helped her get into healthier relationships with other people. Yeah. So family trauma is profound and it affects us in such unconscious ways. And I've seen it to be the root cause of many emotional and physical issues. Yeah. I
Mhm.
had another client who had cancer, and the cancer went away after she realized where the trauma was coming from. And the trauma was her father cheating on her mother. So her mother was very upset with the father. And so my client, out of love and loyalty, took the side of her mother and rejected her father. And in the session, when she realized how much of that anger and rejection and hate towards the father was not her own, but actually belonged to her mother, I asked her to slowly and respectfully ask her mother for forgiveness if she let go of her mother's anger and resentment towards the father and feel her own pain and shock and trauma about her father's affair. Yeah, I'm not saying she had to make the affair okay, but just recognizing what her own true feelings versus her mother's exhaustion, pain, anger. That set my client free. And then she could look at her father and say, dear father, please forgive me. I've been looking away from you or rejecting you. Yeah, it shocked me what you did, but you're still my father. And in some way, I'm connected with you. And so that restoration of connection healed her system. And today, without drugs, without chemotherapy, she's cancer free. Okay. So family trauma, whether it's loss of loved ones, whether it's abortions, miscarriages, or emotional and psychological abuse, leads to, like, if those traumas are happening to our family members and our parents, etc., and our siblings, that leads to our own sense of disconnection with our parents. Yeah, experiences of also, and that disconnection can feel like abuse to some people. Yeah. And these traumas can also turn into abusive relationships as well. For example, another client, their grandfather committed suicide or went crazy, basically in jail, and killed himself. And one of his children basically became psychologically affected as well. Yeah, he wasn't stable mentally. So this is my client's uncle. And he was overly aggressive and very hard on his children. And then his child, which is my client's cousin, was traumatized. Yeah. See, it's being passed down. And eventually and unfortunately, my client was emotionally and physically and sexually abused by his cousin. Yeah. And so we did some work using family constellations therapy. This is what I do at the retreats, by the way. When people come to retreats, we work on everyone's individual issues to help people resolve family trauma. Yeah. So through gentle gestalt exercises, family constellation, we help this client resolve this abuse. Yeah, by understanding where it came from and really also connecting with this grandfather who lost his mind in jail because of a war trauma. Yeah. So even war traumas from our ancestors lead to psychological and emotional abuse in the family system. And I have lots of other examples, but I'll wait for you to ask me some more questions.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing some examples there to really help us picture what that trauma in the family can look like and how it can translate. So it's very interesting to see how that is all connected. And I know you told us earlier you were going to share about why homeopathy is so important for healing this sort of abuse. Could you tell us about that and what are some of the remedies that you cover in your work?
Okay. I'll cover homeopathic remedies right now, and then I'll go back and share a few more examples of family constellations therapy because it's super important to understand where these root causes come from. Yeah.
Mhm.
So homeopathy is a form of medicine, energetic form of medicine that was created by Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. And it's using very dilute substances from nature, diluted to such a level that it works on an energetic level, a frequency level. And because our emotions are frequency based and trauma is also like an experience, yeah, so it's a vibration in our system. Homeopathy is a wonderful remedy to use to release that frequency, that traumatic stress and frequency that we experience in psychological or emotional abuse. Yeah. Also, when we have any other form of trauma or even anxiety and depression, homeopathy transforms the body rather than suppresses symptoms. It transforms you out of that state of mental illness and stress and trauma and feeling low self-esteem or neglected and abused. Yeah, you come out of it um, more organically than just using drugs and normal therapy to reason your way out of abuse. Yeah, it's different. You can see reasoning is a bit more forceful versus transformation is more organic. And that leads to long-term well-being. Yeah, longer lasting health, I should say. So in homeopathy, we have certain remedies for certain kinds of trauma and abuse. Yeah. And for example, Staphylococcus aureus is great, is a beautiful remedy when somebody has been emotionally abused and they have a lot of suppressed anger. Yeah. Ignatia is a person who feels abandoned, also rejected, or betrayed. And they feel a lot of tearfulness, a sense of lump in the throat, and maybe crying a lot. Yeah. So in my online course, I cover different kinds of traumas and abuses and different remedies based on the symptoms somebody's feeling. For example, another beautiful remedy that I often use may be natrum muriaticum. So if somebody's been abandoned or lost, like broken up with a loved one, yeah, or maybe even has mother issues. So mom wasn't available because I don't know, she had a premature birth with you and you were stuck in the hospital for a long time and you have this abandonment trauma, or she had to leave and you're left with your grandparents, for example. That is a very deep trauma for a young child. We don't realize how strong it is. And so Natrum muriaticum is an excellent remedy for that, especially if you're prone to a sense of depression, loneliness, withdrawal, and maybe resentment or mistrusting people. Yeah. So in my online course and in the clinic, of course, we look at the whole picture of a person. Yeah. Your symptoms that you have, as well as the kind of trauma you have. And because it's so detail oriented to your specific symptoms, homeopathy goes much deeper than most other remedies out there. And homeopathy, because it takes into account your entire picture, one pill can almost be like 10 sessions of therapy. Yeah, because it truly transforms your entire energetic vibration. Versus sometimes therapy can go layer by layer. But I always combine homeopathy with family constellations therapy because homeopathy sometimes doesn't necessarily treat the ancestral trauma. It can in an indirect way, but generally I prefer to work on the ancestral trauma as well, because that could be the root cause of why you're experiencing trauma in your life or pain or anxiety or depression or even bad relationships. Yeah. Because if your parents were fighting a lot, yeah. In fact, I had a client, their parents were fighting a lot and she was so stressed and she did everything she could to try and keep peace in the home. Yeah, a lot of effort. And she was walking eggshells her whole life. And her nervous system became so afraid of conflict that she walked in eggshells even in society, socially. And she became a people pleaser. And because of that fear of conflict, then she never stood up for herself in a relationship. So she was prone to abuse. Yeah. So of course, remedies like Ignatia and Staphylococcus could help her, but then until she could really see, she could really see that Her people pleasing was actually coming from trying to keep her parents together or peace in the home. She was stuck in this paradigm. So I got her to say, "Dear mom, dear dad, it's costing me so much to try and keep you guys together. I'm only a child. Yeah, what's between the two of you, I leave it with you out of love and respect. You are the big ones. I'm only the child. I cannot save you both of you, yeah, or your feelings." For the first time in her life, she felt a bit more independent and centered. And when she experienced that centeredness, she had more confidence and self-esteem. And then it was harder for somebody to challenge her or break her down now. Yeah. That's the power of constellation work combined with homeopathy as well.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing about some of those remedies as well as some more examples of what that family constellation can look like. And I could see how using those two together could be really powerful and healing. And I know that in some of your work, you also combine Gestalt therapy, trauma healing, and family constellations therapy to help people recover from emotional and psychological abuse. Could you tell us a little bit about that combination?
Yeah, so we run retreats in different parts of the world, Europe, Africa, sometimes in South America as well. They're coming up. And it's important to be emotionally sensitive to people's needs. So family constellations is one tool where we look at, of course, the family and ancestral trauma. But then I use Gestalt to be sensitive enough to support the person in their healing process. Yeah, because it's easy to force someone to say healing sentences or try and resolve the family trauma. But when you use forceful language or you're not sensitive enough, the client can be traumatized or overwhelmed. So I use Gestalt therapy and intuitive counseling to really support the sensitivity and vulnerability of my clients. I also do EMDR, somatic experiencing, and different trauma therapies. So I understand that when a client is stuck and unable to move through a certain kind of trauma, there's other tools that I help the nervous system with to feel more peaceful in letting go of some of the stress or the overwhelm that came from the trauma. So the client has a much more gentler or safer experience at the retreats. Yeah. And so it's important to combine, of course, some psychological approach that's healthy. So I prefer Gestalt and EMDR, etc., with constellation therapy. And of course, there's always homeopathy to use in the background as well.
Hmm. Yeah, super fascinating to hear about that combination and how it can be really helpful to have that sort of support in these situations. And I know so many people focus on really only healing the mind when it comes to trauma and abuse. Why is it so important to heal both the body and the mind?
So a lot of people's mental health symptoms, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, OCD, etc., can come from an imbalance of neurotransmitters, right? Low serotonin, dopamine, GABA, melatonin, etc. And yes, these imbalances can be caused by trauma, whether it's childhood trauma or family trauma, but also often our gut, our liver, and our adrenal glands are also involved, yeah, biologically speaking, in affecting our brain chemicals. And I'll briefly walk you through how the body affects the mind. So we have a stomach and intestines, and the intestines are like a tube, a nice lining, kept healthy by good bacteria and good food. Over time, with antibiotic use, poor diet, chemicals, pesticides, etc., we kill off the good bacteria and we damage our gut lining. Our good bacteria produce over 90% of our neurotransmitters. So when we kill them off, our mood is affected directly right there. Then when we damage our intestinal lining, we get leaky gut syndrome. So toxins leak into our bloodstream, and that causes inflammation everywhere in the body. And that's the leading cause for asthma, eczema, arthritis, and a lot of chronic conditions. The chronic inflammation also disrupts our neurotransmitters, leading to worsening of mental health symptoms. Food sensitivities to gluten, dairy, etc., can trigger this inflammation and neurotransmitter imbalances. In fact, I had a suicidal client whose suicidal thoughts went away just by removing gluten from her diet. Yeah, I'm not saying that if you're suicidal that you stop gluten. You need immediate help, of course, but this is just one example. And in my online course, I cover all the remedies we use to heal the gut and the liver and the adrenal glands. So going back to chronic inflammation, the inflammation then goes to our master organ, which is the liver. The liver is in charge of hormone production or hormone balancing, bile production, digestion, etc. In Chinese medicine and many cultures, the liver is known as the seat of the soul because it does over 500 different functions. Now, every day when your liver is intoxicated with pesticides, chemicals in the drinking water, toxins in the environment, as well as chronic inflammation from leaky gut, our livers become stagnant and the liver produces less bile, and also you get hormonal imbalances. When you have less bile, basically you get more gas, bloating, indigestion, and constipation. And that's why most people with constipation, they get better when they do the liver protocol in the course, which is generally milk thistle, dandelion, and other liver herbs to stimulate bile flow. Now, people with liver stagnation, also, most women with liver stagnation, they'll get PMS symptoms, which is breast tenderness, gas, bloating, constipation, yeah, cramping, clotting, and mood swings. And why is that? Because the liver is involved. Yeah, liver is involved in hormonal metabolism. And when the liver is stagnant, we usually get a progesterone deficiency, estrogen excess. And when progesterone is low, then GABA, the anti-anxiety neurotransmitter, doesn't work so well in the brain, leading to anxiety, depression, insomnia, and some people get a lot of rage. And that's because also of serotonin imbalances due to liver stagnation affecting the microbiome and our hormones, and therefore our neurotransmitters. Yeah. And lastly, we come to the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are what keeps us our powerhouse for energy, yeah, and keeps our mind stable. And our adrenal glands are stressed every day by financial issues, relationship issues, deadlines, everything, right? And also, when we have unresolved trauma from childhood, that trauma is stuck in our nervous system, and that trauma also stresses our adrenal glands and keeps it in fight, flight, or freeze response. So we have unhealed trauma from childhood. We have everyday stress as well, pushing our adrenal glands. We have ancestral trauma as well from our parents and our ancestors, pushing our adrenal glands. And chronic inflammation also pushes our adrenal glands to make cortisol to balance the inflammation. Yeah, so many things are exhausting your adrenal glands. So we go into adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue then leads to a cortisol imbalance, adrenaline imbalance, and all these things then suppress our neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, GABA, melatonin, leading to anxiety, depression, insomnia, suicidal thoughts, and mental health issues. Yeah. And so in the online course, I cover different remedies, of course, to release trauma, homeopathic remedies to release trauma that frees up the adrenal glands, certain herbs to, of course, nourish the adrenal glands back to health, herbs to detoxify the liver, and all my protocols, of course, to heal the gut. Yeah. And that's why it's important to heal the body by healing the gut, liver, adrenal glands, heal the mind by releasing stress, childhood trauma, and basically other things that exhaust our nervous system. And also important to heal systemic trauma or family trauma. Yeah. To free up our entanglements, our loyalty that keeps us sick, our loyalty to our parents suffering, our loyalty to our grandparents suffering, that keeps us unwell and miserable. Yeah. So in the online courses, I cover how to heal all these pillars of health: the gut, the liver, the adrenal glands, emotional trauma, and systemic trauma. 5 pillars, very important to heal. And at the retreats, we focus mostly on family constellations therapy because that's where the fun is. That's where the fun begins.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for explaining those 5 pillars. And I can see how healing the body is so important, just as important it sounds as healing and working with the mind in these situations. So that was such great information and so much to learn from and explore further. And I wanted to just come back real quick to about the family constellations, family trauma, and ask you, for anyone who is interested in taking a deeper look at that within themselves, what if someone feels like they won't be able to realize what that connection is, where the family trauma came from, or why they're experiencing what they're experiencing in regards to their family?
Good question, Brielle. So in my online course on family constellations therapy, I have a questionnaire that people can fill out, yeah, that helps them ask the right questions to find out the different traumas in their life. And then when they come to see me for an online session or come to one of my retreats, we feel it out energetically, one, And I also look at the body's response when I mention certain things. So I get a sense of how the body's responding kinesthetically, yeah, to certain events. And then we get an indication that has more charge on the body. Yeah. And of course, we use representatives at the retreats as well. And so I have people who basically represent family members, your family members, even though they haven't met them, yeah, energetically, they represent your family members or certain traumas or diseases in your life or in your ancestors' lives. And by looking at these representatives and their behavior and your response to the behavior, I get an indication of what is more relevant to your system and to your healing. And that's how we can resolve things for you in a much deeper and more complete way at the retreats as well. So I highly encourage you to make time, do the online courses, of course, on my website, but think about coming to these retreats because one, they're safe, they're a lot of fun, and they're in beautiful locations, Africa, Europe, Sardinia, Crete, you name it.
Amazing. Yes, thank you so much for speaking to that. I'd imagine some people were wondering about that and how that works. So I appreciate you giving us a little bit more detail there. And let's talk about how people can dive even deeper with you. I know you have a free ebook and some free videos on your website, and we have a button that leads over to your website below for people to go and check that out if you'd like to tell us a little bit about that ebook and videos.
So my website is drameet.com, drameet.com. There's a lot of free masterclasses where you can learn to combine trauma healing, homeopathy, family constellations therapy. I give lots of case examples. Then there's full online courses that give all my protocols for gut healing, liver detox, adrenal support. There's a full family constellations course. There's a homeopathy course as well. So you can learn about remedies for specific kinds of trauma, specific kinds of emotions, how to use homeopathic books and repertories. Yeah, it's all there. Yeah. So the free videos walk you through systematically healing the basic pillars of your health. And then you can dive deeper into my exact protocols using these online courses. And of course, there's a page there specifically for retreats. When you sign up, you get all the notifications of when the next retreats are. And yeah, I limit them to about 12 to 15 people right now so that you get some individual attention when you show up to these retreats. Yeah. And a lot of business people and therapists also come to these retreats because when you heal family trauma, you become transformed as well, both as a therapist, as a client, but also as a entrepreneur. Yeah, you let go of blocks that are holding you back in thriving in life. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I don't know if I really have an ailment, think about transforming your life so that you can just enjoy everything more completely.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for offering so many great resources. And as a reminder to everyone watching or listening, you can click the button below and head over to Dr. Ameet's website and check all those great resources out. And then, are there any final insights you'd like to share before we wrap up, Dr. Ameet?
Hmm. I'm just channeling something right now. I just want to say, look after yourself emotionally. Don't stress yourself or be hard on yourself to get better. Yeah, be patient with yourself and love that pain, the vulnerability that you struggle against. In fact, on my website, there's an exercise that is called It's Permission to Heal or It's Safe to Feel This Way or That Way once in a while. That can really help you be calm within yourself and protect yourself against harming yourself from self-criticism or judging yourself too much. Yeah. So I really invite you to look after yourself emotionally and be patient with yourself because that self-love is the first step towards deeper healing.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing those powerful insights, as well as just sharing so much great wisdom with us today about family constellations and homeopathy.
Thank you, Brielle. Lots of love, everyone. Thank you.